Welcome to this episode of Criminology Chats. I'm your host, JR, and with me is Ashley.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
In this episode, Ashley and I will talk with two police cadets in training at a police academy in Colorado. They're about halfway through their training.
So we actually talked to them, but at different times. The first half of the show will feature Rocco, and then the second half will be about Lindsey.
Rocco, we appreciate you being on our show today, and thanks for taking time out of your training schedule to be here.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
And a couple of things here. We have, as you know, we got Ashley here on the show. She's a student with our school, and we got a few questions to ask you about being a police officer cadet going through the training right now. And one of the questions I have, first thing, is why this profession?
Well, growing up, I've had a lot of big role models in my life, and many of which were either in law enforcement or prior military. And it really was a big factor for me when choosing profession, and it was always something that I looked forward to, and I saw that aspect of their lives and how they handled themselves with respect and maturity, and they carried themselves very well. And I just wanted to be like them. I aspired to be in a position where I could help people and really support the people around me.
How far through your training are you?
We're about halfway, so it's about 10 weeks in out of a 17, 18 week academy.
I know you haven't completed your whole academy, but do you think that is proper time, or do you think it would be nice to have more time to enter into becoming a police officer, if that makes sense?
I think so far it's an adequate time. We've been really progressing. So we start off slow, a crawl, walk, and run mentality. So we start off slow, introductory level scenarios and classes, really just learn the basics, and then we build from there. So even going into different scenarios and, different positions we're in, we have a strong basic foundation of what the job is and what expectations we need to meet. So going from there, I think about halfway, I feel confident, and many of my cadets also feel confident in the knowledge that we've been taught and just the experience or background history we each have. I think that plays into how we handle each situation. So I think the duration so far has felt comfortable. I'm excited we kind of learn and do more practical situations and kind of experiments, if you will, on later on in the academy. That way we have that foundation and then we can proceed from there. So we're starting to implement more of those as we're going through, which has been fun to transition and actually get hands-on in situations and put yourself in that role.
Like real life scenarios.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
What kind of jobs did you hold before getting into the academy?
I went to high school and I started working at Starbucks actually during my senior year, and I graduated in 2020. So my second semester of high school was all online. It was a really different scenario, different environment to be in, but I was still working at Starbucks, and I continued from 2020 all the way until 2025 when I was hired by my agency. And from there, I took about 2 weeks, and then I started up the academy. So I had a lot of experience with people and interacting with all sorts of people on a quick get to know your name and your order and that's it kind of situation. So it was interesting moving from that to more of a structured law enforcement style career. And it's definitely a different dynamic, but I feel comfortable going into it because I have that people skills ability, and I'm able to talk to people and be friendly and have that communication aspect.
I know you're in the academy and I know you still haven't even finished it, so it's probably kind of hard to say, what do you aspire to be, or what's your end goal, or where would you be happy to be?
Ultimately, I want to be on some sort of specialty team within law enforcement, whether that be SWAT or K-9. I don't really have any big aspirations as to move up to like a chief level or promote right now. I just want to get comfortable in the role and feel confident. So I look forward to staying with my agency for a long time and just being in the environment and really getting to know everyone.
Like getting familiar with everything. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. I want to make sure I feel confident and then move up. And then if I wanted to go sergeant, I think that would be the next path I would take. But definitely a specialty unit if possible. Just work on my skills and all my experiences and make sure I have a solid foundation.
Great. What is your the biggest fear? Because I know this whole position is very very chaotic and in the sense in this culture right now. So like what's your biggest fear? If it's either something like physical or like an emotional, like what do you fear the most?
That's an interesting question. I would probably say the biggest fear is balancing work and home life. I know a lot of officers go through many challenging situations and see things that most people don't in their lifetime and go through these traumatic situations on daily or weekly or monthly
Yeah.
level. And I think just being able to balance that is the biggest thing for me. I feel confident in my skills, and I feel like I have prepared and I have surrounded myself with the right people, and I feel confident that I'll be able to manage all the people and the interactions that I'll go through. And I don't necessarily have any other fears per se. I have hope and trust in all my fellow coworkers, and I feel confident in my abilities. So I think just bringing it back to how these situations will impact me is the biggest concern.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, because even if you start already with like a solid foundation, that'll just kind of reflect later on to your journey. And so that's really good. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. I would say definitely seeing my role models, and one of which was my brother, who also is in law enforcement, and seeing how
Mhm.
he carries himself and manage these situations. And he's been through pretty intense calls, and seeing how he carries himself and protects his family, and he's still there every day for them. And that's really
Yeah.
something that I aspire to look forward to and aspire to be.
So like the next question would be like your family. Like I know you said it has a lot of like family connection to you being into the academy, but like what does your family think about like being like entering law enforcement?
I think my parents were the most skeptical. They knew what the costs and the prices would be when my brother went in. So they had a baseline understanding of the interactions I was going to be having and the people I'd be working with. And that definitely helps in their trust in me and having that faith that I would be okay and I would be safe no matter the situation. And I think once you have that family trust and you have the ability to say, hey, I may be going into bad and dangerous situations, but I'm going to be okay. I got good people around me. And ultimately, as long as I have their support and their faith, then that's all that matters. I
Like
feel
a
confident.
huge big thing is like just having a good emotional support system and a strong
Exactly.
foundation to begin with. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
good. That's good to point out. Yeah.
Yep. And most of the things I've heard from instructors and other officers from my agency is that it's important to have a good work-life balance and to be able to manage the stress that you have. So being able to just have healthy ways to manage that stress, whether for me it's working out. I love working out and it helps me just calm and relax. So that's definitely something that I can rely on as well as my family and friends.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That's good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to hear because I can tell you until you experience it, though, it's kind of a different animal. And if you've never been in those situations, they can do all that training. And I don't want to say anything here that might discourage you at all. And I'm glad you're in this profession because it was mine too. But the first call that I went on by myself, traffic accident, I had to hold two guys' hands while they died. And one guy had neck was stretched out because they didn't wear their seat belts and stuff. And so no one at that back then, and I'll date myself, that was the late 70s, they didn't really tell me how to handle that. So I had to rely on the people around me. But you got to remember the people around me who were my supervisors at the time came even before my time, like in the 60s. Okay. So 60s and early 70s. So how they told me to handle it, I wouldn't recommend you handling it. They said you just have to put it out of your mind, segregate it off in your brain, and of course have a few drinks. And that always helps, but it doesn't always help. So my thing is I'm glad to see today that what you're saying is very good. I hope that works for you. I really do. And with your brother being a cop too, I think that'll help because you can bounce things off and talk to him about things that from not only as a police officer but as a actual relative. And talking to a relative who understands is a whole lot better sometimes than even talking to a colleague. So I think that's great because I think that'll be one of your bigger challenges when you first come in is how you can deal with what you saw. You know what I'm saying? I think that's going to be one of the bigger things initially. And over time, unfortunately, I got kind of numb to it and just, hey, it is what it is. Of course, I went a little different path than you. I was in the investigation, so my job was then to try to find out who did this to to that person or that or people, you know. So I'm glad
Yep.
to hear that. In the academy thus far, have they taught you anything about how to de-escalate situations or about self-help on the part of a police officer? Have they talked about that or anything? And if so, what have they talked about?
Yeah, definitely. We've gone over that actually a decent amount, and it started from the beginning of the academy and it's worked its way up until this point. And it's really about the self-help and reaching out to not only your coworkers, having those healthy outlets that you can reach out to. And I know a lot of agencies have like peer support, which is a great outlet for you to use, and it's confidential and you can talk to them and really have another person who's either in your line of work or a similar agency or whatever it may be, and they are there to support you and be there for you. And because we talk about it so much, you learn the importance. And even though I'm not in the role right now, you can see that okay, this is something that I should prioritize now, and it will help me from now on. If I build this strategy now, I can implement it, and it'll be a seamless transition into my line of work. So and we've done different classes like that, de-escalation classes and just pedestrian contact classes. So we are able to talk to people and then we can go from there and utilize that skill to not only talk to people on the streets, but we can talk to people when we need help as well.
It's amazing. Wow. I do have a question. So, like, like you said, you're not in the role right now, but you are kind of like familiar with everything. You have like family in there, whatnot. Like, did you think prior to entering the academy, did you have like a completely different like perspective or like an idea of it, or has it changed so far, or has it stayed the same? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think my perspective has stayed pretty consistent. I've had the same mentality on how officers are going to help the community and help the public, and I think going into the academy, you're really able to see how much more they do. So we do a lot of like immediate first aid if necessary. Like we're usually the first ones on scene if it's not necessarily safe for paramedics or fire to respond. So you have a whole new aspect of supporting and being there for the community for not only crimes and investigations, but you can be the first responder and help save someone if they have a gunshot wound or if they've been injured in some way. You have the training and the ability to address that and go from there and be able to delegate and really take control of that situation and then make sure everything goes from there. So we've been doing a lot of first aid classes and different scenarios and
Yeah.
situations where we can really address that. But I think that was eye-opening for me because I can really see, okay, this isn't just finding different crimes that people commit or investigating crimes or seeing if people are innocent or guilty. It's really searching and seeing, okay, I'm here to be the protector if something goes bad, and I'm also here to support when times are good. You're that consistency people need in their best days and
I think that's like such a nice thing to say, and you said it very well, just because I feel like that's like the main purpose of law enforcement, and oftentimes that's forgotten. But if you're like starting from the beginning and you constantly tell yourself that and you go into that mentality, that's amazing to have, because then that's what you'll represent when you enter. So that's really good to hear. That's very comforting.
it's usually a misconception some people have when they're not involved in law enforcement is they can sometimes get into the paradigm that oh they only do one thing. And when you're able to take a step back and even from someone who's in the process you can see okay that we have an importance, a big impact on the community, and how can we as officers and as an agency go from there and support our community and be there despite the bad connotations that law enforcement can have. And I think it's just breaking that perception and showing that not all bad situations are necessarily going to happen. Like we're here to be the good and the protectors, and that's
Yeah.
something that I've always aspired to be is be that protection for people who need it. So ultimately, that's how I see it. I know a lot of people that I used to work with had that connotation, and when I was going into the job, I was thinking, if I'm a good person and these people are friends with me and they know what kind of character I have, then what would change if I was in law enforcement? So I wanted to be that person that they can say, oh, he's a good guy and he's going to be an officer, so I can trust him. So building that trust and that rapport is really going to be key, and it's going to be challenging because you're not always going to have that face-to-face interaction on people's best days. So it's just doing what you can to make the moment right and just be there and build the trust when you can.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And I just want to know you. So, what did all your fellow employees and or colleagues there at Starbucks think about you going into this job?
You know, many of them were not in favor. A lot of them wanted me to either do EMS or fire, something still first responder, but not police because they had that perspective. And I've had a lot of them who immediately turned, and we were good friends, we were good coworkers, and they immediately flipped the switch. And it was suddenly like, oh, well, you want to be a police officer, so you're not a good guy anymore. Like you're not the same. You don't care about what I care about. And it's like, I still value your opinion. I'm going to give you the time of day so you can communicate with me. I'm going to listen to what you have to say because I want to know and be there for you. Doesn't matter what you believe in. We're the same. We're all people. And if you vote for a certain party or whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm going to listen to you. You have a perspective and an opinion, and so do I. It doesn't have to match, but we're still people, and I'm going to be here for you. So that's what was hard for me because I lost a lot of good friends from that transition when I actually decided to tell people, and it was hard, but ultimately I want to be there again. Like I said, I want to be the good person that's in the role, and I can change that paradigm if I can. I want to be that change for people to know, all right, there are good people in law enforcement, and there have been great people that I've come in contact with who are in law enforcement in my agency and many others, and they're just stand-up guys and gals, and it's been a great atmosphere, and I just want everyone else in the community to see that and see that we're here to help ultimately, and we're all the same. It doesn't matter if you're wearing the uniform or not. I'm just here and I'm wearing it, and just because I'm wearing that doesn't make me any much different than you.
Yeah, that's good. And that's good to hear. I think you'll do well. That's one thing that also I think police officers struggle with is having people outside of the profession as friends, People outside the profession don't know how to act around you. Maybe some of your actual high school friends may still, want to hang out and do those things. And I still think that would be great. But I am sad to hear you lose friends just because you're taking another path in a job. That's, in my opinion, that sucks.
Yeah. And it's a sad reality of how the world has come, but ultimately if you can be that change and show that still continue, and going back to your point, it is good to have friendships not only in law enforcement but outside. And that's something that the academy and many of the officers I've talked to from my agency have really hit on is you want to make sure you have both those relationships because you can't just get sucked into the job because then you'll never get out of that mentality, that mindset. So being able to just have outside friends, whether it be back from my high school or just from my old job in general. And I have great relationships, and many of which still support me in my career. But it is hard to see the ones that do disagree and change their mind. But I think, like you said, keeping that friendship both in law enforcement and outside it's going to be crucial in order for you to just keep a healthy mentality and mindset.
Yeah, and I can tell you too, that it was very hard for me to even have Ashley be a co-host because, she's a pharmacy tech. So, you know how they are, you know what I'm saying? It was kind of tough, but, I looked past that. She looked past the fact that I was a professor. And so here we are. So,
Exactly.
it works.
I do have one more question for you. So I know you kind of already brought up the point that your main goal or the main purpose of law enforcement is to protect and serve the community. And obviously the conversation has kind of turned a dirty eye to law enforcement. And it kind of sounds like you kind of want to change that and you kind of want to show the other reality of law enforcement that they actually do want to help the people and everything. But how or what do you think you can do personally to kind of help change that or kind of change the relationship between community and you guys or your agency, even though it's just 1% at a time, change has to happen somewhere. So what do you think you need to do or should do?
I think honestly, just being honest with myself and sticking to who I am as a person, and just really sticking to my morals. My upbringing has shaped me into the person I am today, and I can thank my parents for that, my family, and I'm religious. I would also thank God as well. It's been a huge factor for me. And I think just sticking to who you are, because if you change and if you try to do extra and do things that you wouldn't normally do, it's not who you are. You got to be genuine in your role. I just want to be honest. I want to be caring, open, and just show that I will give all my effort to support the people around me. And if I can outreach and communicate with the public during the job, that is 100% what I want to do. I want to be there and support on people's best days and their worst. So bringing my best self to every call on my good days and bad, I gotta be the best person I can be for others.
That's amazing. Yeah. Because just like you said, like it's just kind of like any other job. Bad day or good day, you still have to go in. But once you like clock in, you have to stop that like bad face and whatever you have going on and just like put on a good face. And obviously, working with community hand in hand, it might get hard to like create that division, but it's needed. So it's good to hear that you're already practicing that mentality.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like we said earlier, it's important to not change. And if I can be who I am and be honest with people, keeping that consistency. And ultimately, when you're dealing with people on their worst days, you're gonna have to be that strong role model for them, because whether they're children or adults, they're looking for you for that protection and for that light at the end of the tunnel. You want to be that light for them. And if you're not showing up at your best and you're not presenting yourself well, you're not showing good presence, then that's gonna reflect down the road. You're having that impact long term. Like you remember hypothetically if you got a speeding ticket, how the officer responded. Like, oh, I was going two over, but he was really friendly and he was, listening to what I had to say in my story. You want to be that nice guy, but you also need to know when the time comes to really be assertive. But
Exactly.
always be aware and try to bring your best self forward.
Well, I guess any other questions you have there, Ashley? Anything else you want to say, Rocco, before we wrap this up? And we appreciate again you being here and taking the time out of your busy schedule and training to do this.
Yeah, you've answered all my questions. I feel like it's very interesting to hear. It's not how I thought it was gonna go. I thought it was gonna go completely different, but it's really here or good to hear this and like very refreshing as well because you don't really hear a lot of that, especially now in any type of conversation. So it's good to hear like more open-mindedness and stuff like that, especially from someone who is young, because you do look young. I don't know how old you are, but you do look young. And hopefully that can help like influence other colleagues like around you. So it's really good to hear. It's a really nice conversation.
Our next guest will be Cadet Lindsey. Okay, Lindsey, thanks for being on our show today.
Thank you so much, and thanks for having me.
And one thing that I want to ask right off the bat here is when it comes to being a cadet in the police academy, what influenced you to apply to this particular profession?
It has been a dream of mine or love of mine, I would say, for many years. And the older I got, the more I knew that time was not on my side at my age. And so I needed to do it sooner rather than later and had the opportunity, and I jumped at the chance to take it.
All right. Now, what did you do before coming into, applying and getting accepted into the academy?
Yeah, I've worked for victim services for 14 years, both through local police department for 10 years and 4 years at the district attorney's office.
All right, Ashley, I know you got some questions.
I feel like it's so interesting because being a female, it definitely changes kind of, I feel like a whole bunch of things. So, first up, like when you are into the academy, do you notice any, I guess just like basic gender differences, like, or do you think it's just kind of the same?
As far as like the amount of people going into the academy, there are more males than there are females.
Uh-huh.
I think we are still in the law enforcement field statistically, there's more males.
Yeah, less
But
represented.
yeah, and I think it's really great to see. I think there's at least seven, even more of us here. I'm probably getting the number wrong, but there's quite a bit of women in here too. And so, I mean, the same thing they ask the male candidates to do, we still do the same thing too. And so
Yeah.
that's good to see too. Yeah, everything seems good as far as being a female there. A lot of stuff we have to do in certain trainings. It can probably feel a little bit different, or
Different. I was gonna say, yeah.
or just afraid that men won't come at us women when we're doing fighting tactics or arrest control as hard as they would the
Yeah.
male half. And so, I'm cognizant of that, but besides that, everybody's been really respectful and wonderful, and just we always say, one family, one fight, and we kind of keep that throughout the whole academy.
Oh, that's amazing. That's good.
Do you feel that that background with a victim's advocacy, do you think that can help you, or have you seen it already help in the academy? And more specifically, do you think it'll help you once you graduate from the academy?
I do. I think it's huge actually, because a lot of times people come into law enforcement wanting to arrest the bad guy. But a lot of times to de-escalate situations, you use your words. So it is about communicating more than anything else to de-escalate a situation. And so I think that being victim-centered, being able to talk to people during their hardest days translates into many realms within law enforcement. I normally see people who are officers that retire at the end of their career and they want to become victim advocates. It is not common for most people to do victim advocates and then go to law enforcement. So that's been quite interesting.
So is that kind of what inspired you to join the academy and like start instead of like, I guess, developing the victim advocacy a little bit further, kind of like the switch up of career?
So for me, I just knew that I wanted to do it when I was younger. My background is in clinical psychology. I have a master's.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I went down that field and then I had children. And so for me, just the concreteness of the work for victim advocacy and also being the areas of gray that law enforcement sees and the danger, I didn't
Uh-huh.
have that as victim advocacy. So for a long time, I felt like being a mother was more important and put that to the forefront. And that's where I went with in my career. And then I just found myself in a really good position in the field. And it just felt like the right time to ask my boss, hey, I would love to do law enforcement. Can I switch careers and still stay with this office? And they said yes. And so I was doing victim advocacy there, and I will come back as an investigator there after I get done here. So there's still some familiarity to me staying in the same area, but I am probably one of the recruits there that has a very different way of getting into this academy as opposed to the others.
I just say that is a little bit different, so you won't necessarily be driving around in a patrol car and things of that nature and doing that type of police work. You'll be more investigative oriented with your particular DA.
I will. I'll be investigative. I'll be an investigator for there, but it'll be investigation oriented, a lot of trial stuff as well. I think a lot of people don't understand that law enforcement scope goes really far. Once the bad guy's arrested, that's great, but then there's also a trial, and you have to make sure that person is held accountable for their actions. And some of those trials, depending on if it is like a homicide or something really big, can take a year to 2 years to go to court. So in between that time, the investigators in the DA's office are working on getting a lot of extra information, phone downloads, what were you searching for on your computer, cameras that could help corroborate what you believe the suspect did. So it's just an extension of patrol law enforcement. But as a victim advocate in the law enforcement realm for 10 years, I got to see the officers on scene. I got to go to scene myself. I had my own car. It wasn't a marked car. We were on the radio. We had to call out. We had to do a lot of things that are similar in scope to what the police officers do on the street, but it will not be in a car day to day and rolling call to call like most of my colleagues right now in the academy.
So does your training in that sense differ at all, or would you still continue like with the same academy, but once you kind of graduate, you kind of stem off into your own?
Yes, I'm definitely going to stem off into my own. I know that it'll be a lot of people that I'll be working with in the district attorney's office have, 10 to 20 years of experience being detectives out in the field in multiple areas. So I'm going to be learning a lot from them and really honing in on what I'll be using on the court-based side. However, they haven't quite told me yet if I'm going to be going out and maybe joining with one of the local law enforcements to do, a few weeks of kind of their FTO or field training with them too. So it's kind of the unknown because it is a different way to get my foot in the door, but I am just excited for whatever they bring.
All right, good. Now, going into the academy, do you have any preconceptions? And if so, has it kind of panned out the way you thought it would, or has there been a lot of differences that you thought was going to occur, but it didn't happen that way?
For me, I didn't know. I was just ready to expect the unexpected, but knowing that I asked for this and I was going to put myself into it. And so I didn't have too many preconceived notions before I walked in the door. So for me, a lot of things have not panned out the way that I thought they would be because I didn't have an idea of what to expect. And knowing that my way of going into investigations is going to be different than most, but also knowing that some people there are self-sponsored and still don't have a route of which way they're going. So that's been a little bit different than if you would go to a regional academy, which is what a lot of officers in this area do too.
Right. And I want to just explain, and hopefully, if I'm saying this incorrectly, Lindsay will correct me, but self-sponsored, that means that a person is going through, been accepted and going through the academy, but they haven't been sponsored by any type of police agency. So they're going in there without having a job when they get done, and they're hoping that once they get through the academy, that some police agency may pick them up. So these self-sponsored folks are hoping that they can get a job somewhere in the police agency that will go ahead and accept their post certification that they got through your academy that you're attending. And then you have the sponsored folks, which are like you and some of the others who already have been hired by that agency and they're putting them through the training. And well, I guess the requirement would be complete the training and then come back to them to work. Is that?
That's correct. The self-sponsored one are paying for the academies themselves. They don't have any place that they're going to. However, one thing that's been really interesting to see is that a lot of these smaller agencies come in and speak with us throughout the academy because they need people in their jurisdictions. And so those self-sponsored recruits more than likely will have a job by the time they get out. So that's a really amazing thing to see.
What does your family, immediate family, and maybe extend to your, like parents or whatever, what do they think about this career change from victim advocate to what you're going to be doing?
So my kids are actually really excited, and I think it's a two-part. I'm actually married to a police officer, and so we know what we're getting ourselves into. But also, the way that I explained this to my children and my family was, hey, this has always been something that mom has wanted to do. You guys are more able to take care of yourself and get to and from places now, and I don't want to have any regrets. And so this is something that I love and I want to do, and my kids are fully behind it. They love it. My daughter sends me cute little messages during the day, even asked for my taser video after I got tasered last week, and I sent it to them. And it's just those fun things that we just keep in a very positive frame. And I think that that's helpful because law enforcement's already been in our background for so long.
Okay. Yeah, I'm assuming your partner, they're supportive, I'm assuming, and everything, even though they kind of know what you're getting into too, from their perspective of being on the job.
Yeah, that definitely knows what I'm getting myself into. Giggles at me because they're more advanced than me when we're training or when we're trying to do certain techniques. But also, I benefit from him helping me learn a lot of the stuff for the tests and breaking it down from home. So I feel like that's been really great too. And I think it's just made us closer and more understanding of what we're going through at the end of the day.
That's fantastic. When it comes to the academy itself and you halfway through it, do you feel that it needs to be longer? Because there is a lot of information out there, both overseas and mainly from the European community, where they have longer academies than we do. For example, in England, you have a year of training. You go through a whole year before you even put into a department, if you will, and a lot of places overseas are national police versus how we have it here in the United States. So as far as the length of training, do you feel that is appropriate, or should it be longer, or is it too long in your opinion right now, knowing you haven't finished, but you know where the end is and how long it's going to take?
Yeah, a lot of places in the Denver metro area are 17 to 20 weeks, but I think that it is quality over quantity. We can have an 8-hour day and maybe stand around at times for scenarios where other places may just roll right through them and get them done quicker. Also, what I'm finding is that unless everybody is going to the same agency, every agency does things different as far as even just the words they use if they're doing a building search or their tactics, the way that they do that, or even the way that they fight. Some people do pressure points, some people do Krav, some people do, a Russian technique. And so I think that is a hard thing to say if those European countries are doing right or not, because I think it depends on if everybody in the country is doing the exact same thing. because all of us learning this, when we go to our specified departments, they're going to teach us the way they want it done,
Yeah.
even more so than what we learned. So that's very interesting. And I would say, I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I would be really interested in seeing what that full year looks like and maybe what stats are driven behind that to say, hey, does law enforcement actually need longer in these academies? And what would that look like?
I do have a question for you. Given everything that you know and everything that you've like experienced, what would you say your biggest fear is like going into the academy or even like reaching your end goal? Like, what do you think like your biggest fear is, I guess, or like maybe a threat?
My biggest fear after the academy is making sure I do it right. I don't fear the safety aspect as much as I think a lot of people out on the streets do because their handcuffing has to be like, really good. And they have the fear of like, we've had so many school shootings around here. That is unfortunately been our reality in Colorado way too much. And so their fears are a little bit different. But mine really is just learning as much as I can and getting up to speed as quick as I can so that I can be a useful entity for the office and pull my weight. Because when you come in a team, you don't want to disappoint a team. So those are my fears. I know that there's the cultural piece around it that probably a lot of people on the streets get because law enforcement is, the bad guy one day, depending on what's in the media, and the next day they're heroes. And so I feel like that is a broad spectrum of law enforcement, but I won't see that the way that they do. So my fears are a little bit different.
Yeah, exactly. And it's reasonable. So that makes sense.
Yeah, and whenever we were talking with Rocco, he unfortunately had lost some friends over the fact that he was going into the profession of being a police officer. But based on your background and where you're coming out of, it appears that you probably won't have that same difficulty that he did in losing friends and things of that nature because of you switching from advocate to now investigator. Have you experienced that though? Has there been any negativity thrown at you or anything?
Yeah, my best friend actually. And so I know that sounds weird, but I've had my best friend since I was 12 and we've talked about law enforcement and she will say things when stuff comes up in the media. You guys are trained for, a certain amount of time, but then you can make a choice to, end someone's life with a gun. And that is a valid thing. I think normal civilians out in the world see things that's on the media. I think they see things that maybe you don't get the full story to. And what I see when she brings up those arguments, and sometimes they're very valid based on the temperature. But my thing is, if we don't get good people in, how is anything ever going to change? And so I try to remind her that, like, just because you have a bad incident or something shown on the media doesn't mean that it's always correct, first of all. And a lot of details aren't shared because law enforcement holds things very close because they have to investigate and there could be a trial. So they hold a lot of cards close to their chest. And I've seen that myself working in victim services and on scenes myself that have been on the media and realizing that the public is not getting most of the information. And it's good. They shouldn't. People have want to do the right thing and get the right information and still hold the evidence and what needs to be shown in the court, close to them. And so I understand that. But I myself just keep reminding her that good people are the only way that things are going to change in this world. And I hope that I'm part of that. And so I don't run away from things that are hard. I run towards them. And that is why I think I've chosen this career more so too.
That's beautiful to hear. But I do have one question before I forget. When we were talking with Rocco, he kind of said his purpose in this academy or when he graduates is to protect and serve the community. And yours is kind of a little bit different, but still kind of overall attending the community. But my question is like how you're talking about change, the good people need to initiate that change. How do you, or what would you do to kind of start that change?
For me, I think being open to both sides, right? A lot of people come in and they're offender focused in law enforcement, right? Get the bad guy. For me, I want to get the whole picture and make sense of it. And I think that that's important and being able to bring forward the best cases and information that I can so that the criminal justice system keeps its integrity, keeps its moral and ethical pieces together, right? I can't imagine that with what I'm doing, it's easy for defendants or for victims. And so I want to be able to work for a community and have them place their trust in us that we're doing our best. And I want to live up to that. And so that is the change is to try to continue to have people have a good interaction and see the hard work and build that trust. because at the end of the day, we are there to serve our community. I think it just depends on how your interaction is with us. That will change. Even if you're a defendant and you get arrested, doesn't mean that you had a bad interaction with an officer. My husband will come home and tell me sometimes he'll arrest somebody and say, thank you for your service, though I see that you're a vet. And there, just that changes him. He's like, maybe it was just a bad day, that bad things happened, right? They're still humans, treating each side with humanity.
I think that's so cool. And I think like you are going back to kind of like what your biggest fear was and kind of creating that change. Like I feel like you already have it within you because of your broad range of experience, like victim advocacy. That is just already like such a good thing to have, especially when having like an open mind, considering victims, even defendants. I think that's a great point to have because a lot of people categorize defendants as the bad guys, they're always bad guys and whatnot. But it's very important to kind of hear the story, kind of just rule out any judgment and just base everything off the facts, which is how it should be.
Yeah, and I hope that my background lends me to that as well. I mean, we all come in with ideas about what everything's going to look like. But at the end of the day, when you are working for people would say the government or in a public sector, our job is to the public, right? We may be police officers or in law enforcement, but we are part of the public. We're part of the community. We live in these communities too. And so just continuing to remember that we've had bad days ourselves and just being able to treat people with dignity and respect, I think is really important.
Yeah,
Well,
that's so important.
yeah, it's important to remember that about treating people like humans, even if they've been arrested, even if, they're on any given day, any human being could do an act that some people would say is horrendous, but yet it happens and they're still human beings, even though they may be going away for a long, long time. They're still human beings and they should be treated as such. And I think that's important. I think my grandfather, I'll never forget what he told me one time when I was younger. He said two things to me. One, if you never lie, you don't have to remember anything. And number two was you can attract more flies with honey than vinegar. That's always resonated with me throughout life, and it's been pretty good for me. I haven't had any type of real bad issues if I approach life and treat people like I would want to be treated.
I think your grandfather's a smart man because both those things are very true, right? That's just the human connection. We connect with people who smile at the grocery store, say, excuse me, if they bump into you, I'm sorry. Just those human things that we have. And the other side, we've all had bad days. We've all lost our temper. We've all done things that haven't been our best moments. And, I think that's just things to remember at the end of the day as well.
Yeah.
I'm just more so fascinated by what you're going to do. It's kind of like what I want to do.
All right.
Back in the day, I wanted to do that stuff too, as forensics, and it's a great way to get into it. But I think we need all of it. We need the mental health, we need the clinical side, we need law enforcement, we need investigators.
We thank Lindsey for joining us today on this episode and for taking time out of her training schedule to do that. Criminology Chats is brought to you by the Chicago School. For more information about the institution, please visit www.thechicagoschool.edu. That's www.thechagoschool.edu. I would like to extend my gratitude to the students who always participate in these episodes. We want to hear from our listeners, so please email us at criminologychatspodcast@gmail.com. That's CRIMINOLOGYCSPODCAST@gmail.com. And also, please check out our YouTube channel at https://www.youtube.com/@Criminology Chats Podcast. This podcast is produced and edited by A.M. Peters with additional post-production services provided by Audio Photo Synthesis. I'd like to make a special point here to say that without her, none of these episodes would be possible. So I really put a good shout out and thank Amy very much for what she does for our podcast. I'm J.R. Rainbolt, and I eagerly anticipate you listening to our next episode. Be safe out there.
The views and perspectives shared in these recordings are intended solely for informational purposes and do not reflect the official stance or policies of the speakers of the Chicago School. Any commercial products and manufacturers mentioned are included for informational reasons only and do not imply endorsement or approval by the speakers of the Chicago School.